crisis-proof trading mindset. Why never quit can wreck your account. The louder you promise to stand firm in a crisis, the faster you train your brain to ignore the only thing that matters in a crisis: fresh evidence that the thesis is broken. It sounds like courage. It looks like discipline. And it behaves like a refusal to cut your losses hard. Dress it up with calm breathing and a stone face all you want. No worries. Right? Believe in yourself, and the red will politely step aside. That is not resilience. That is denial in a suit. Your lines worship steadiness. Stand tall. Do not get knocked down. Stay calm. Rise above. Convert every hit into opportunity. Keep a positive self-image, no matter what. Keep past wins looping on the mental screen. Keep faith, even after loss. Clean and motivational. Sure, but dangerously imprecise. The focus is not on reading the tape. It is on polishing the mirror. That subtext trains the mind to protect identity even when price action screams. A stubborn long gets wrecked on a pump and dump, not because the market is cruel, but because the mirror matters more than the message on the chart. Refuse to give up your image. There it is. The anchor around the ankle. Replaying old victories and insisting on belief, regardless of what was lost, recasts red as a test of character rather than a signal. Once identity sits on the line, the stop becomes a negotiation. The invalidation level turns elastic. A wick that should end the idea feels like an insult that invites a revenge trade. The trade is no longer a hypothesis. It is a billboard for your worth. That billboard demands defending, and defense in that headspace usually means averaging down dressed as courage. Daily self-improvement and step-by-step success show up next. But the engine in the text is affirmation, not adaptation. Stay positive. Never quit. Be courageous. Markets pay in risk units, not in pep talk credits. Grit respects new information and takes the hit when the edge evaporates. Fixation hides behind slogans and calls the hiding place mindset. The more time spent polishing the mirror, the blurrier the chart gets. Spirals rarely begin with fear alone. They begin when pride overrules the update and calls it strength. The only real failure is quitting. Nice for a poster. Lethal for a desk. Traders do not get destroyed because they quit too early. They get destroyed because they cling too long to a bad identity bet. Exiting when the setup is invalidated is not quitting. It is the price of staying in the game. Yet, when every exit is framed as moral collapse, hesitation spreads. The stop feels optional. A small loss becomes a slow bleed. A slow bleed grows into a drawdown that gets romanticized as a comeback. Meanwhile, slippage compounds. FOMO simmers. And the account bleeds, while the ego writes motivational captions. Choice is yours. True. But the decisive choice already happened upstream. The moment crisis was defined as an attack on you rather than a test of the setup. The path bent. From there, each tick against the position became a referendum on worth. Old victories turned into anesthesia instead of lessons. Belief, cut loose from data, mutated into a shield that reflects loss as temporary shame rather than structural error. The outcome is familiar. Bag holding masquerades as patience. Averaging down masquerades as conviction. Calling it mindset does not make it edge. Stand firm on what? Exactly. When standing firm rests on identity, it cracks on the next unexpected wick. When it rests on a living process, it flexes without breaking. Your script blends resilience with image retention and sells the blend as composure. Sweet on the way in, bitter on the way out, with slippage for dessert. The longer that mix gets sipped, the harder it becomes to admit that calm is just a costume for the fear of being wrong. So, when the next rip tears through the level you swore to defend, what exactly are you standing on? You asked what you are standing on. Let's drag the floorboards. The script says, stand firm, keep calm, stay positive, keep believing. Project past wins on the mind's screen. Sounds like armor. In practice, it is makeup on a bruise. The more energy poured into a positive self-image, the more any price that contradicts that image looks like an insult, not information. That twist is the rot. Identity glues itself to a position, and the ticker becomes a mirror. Each red tick whispers disrespect, and the ego rushes to defend. No worries, you say, and the position grows teeth. Keep a positive view of yourself no matter what. Read that again, no matter what. That pledge turns updates into threats. A level that should scream, edge is gone, becomes a stage to prove composure. So, patience gets rebranded as discipline while the trade sinks. The refusal to look weak dies hard. It drags the stop with it. And, while the script celebrates courage under fire, the actual behavior it licenses is the slow death of flexibility. You do not cut your losses hard when the cut would tear the banner of self-belief. You nurse. You justify. You call it mindset. And you get wrecked when the pump turns into a dump. Play your past wins on the screen of the mind. Fine. Highlight real therapy. But the mind is not neutral. It cherry-picks the prettiest entries and the fattest exits, then overlays that fantasy on the current mess. That overlay distorts risk. The worst part is how clean it feels. Confidence surges, not because the setup improved, but because the movie got louder. The tape loses priority. The trade becomes a sequel to a victory that already happened. Sequels rarely respect stops. Sequels chase the feeling. Pride loves sequels. Believe in yourself, no matter what you lost, no matter what you suffered. There it is again, the triple no matter what. Absolute language breeds absolute blindness. Belief detached from conditions sounds like strength. It functions like a spell against revision. Each fresh candle that challenges the thesis meets a hardened stare that calls itself grit. The chart does not care how stoic the stare looks. Composure without recalibration is not composure. It is stillness, while the ship takes on water. Traders shed blood, sweat, and tears, not because they doubt too fast, but because they believe too slow. The only real failure is quitting. Motivational sugar. Market poison. When quitting is the only villain, every exit risks sounding like failure. So exits get delayed and redefined. A cut becomes a temporary adjustment. A liquidation becomes a reset. Words keep the self clean while the balance turns dirty. Bag holding hides inside the costume of courage. And the costume looks sharp right up until the broker margin calls the wardrobe. I am not saying courage is worthless. I am saying your text confuses courage with clinging and baptizes the confusion as mindset. That confusion is how accounts drown quietly. Step-by-step success. Sure, progress loves steps. But the steps here are carved from affirmations, not from post-trade truth. The order is upside down. The script elevates feeling steady first and invites evaluation later. Maybe. That order teaches the brain to treat discomfort as a test of character, not as a prompt to audit the edge. So the habit that grows is not improvement. It is tolerance. Tolerance for drawdowns that could have been scratches. Tolerance for thesis creep. Tolerance for a P&L that bleeds while the inner monologue reads like a poster. Meanwhile, the market pays only in points and basis, not in quotes about grit. Choice is yours. True. But the choices have been preloaded by the framing. When the frame says standing down equals quitting, every genuine exit feels immoral. When the frame crowns optimism as the centerpiece, every sober recalculation feels like betrayal. When the frame loops past victories, Every sober loss feels like a personal scandal. That triad manufactures a traitor who defends identity at the cost of edge and labels the defense with heroic words. Here is the bitter part. The more disciplined the self-image looks on the outside, the more expensive the denial gets on the inside. So, if the script's armor is polished but the process keeps leaking, what exactly does that armor protect besides pride? And how much more will it cost when the next crisis is not a test of character, but a clean signal that the idea expired 5 candles ago? Let's stop circling and name the systemic disease baked into the text. 3 absolutes run the whole script. Keep the self positive no matter what. Keep the past wins on loop. Never quit, because quitting equals real failure. Those lines feel like armor, but in practice, they assemble a closed loop where identity validates identity and price becomes background noise. Once that loop is humming, every tick is interpreted through a devotional lens. Green confirms virtue. Red challenges virtue. The market is no longer information. It is a moral scoreboard. No worries. Right? Breathe slower. Stare harder. And the loss politely converts into a test you pass by enduring it. Unconditional belief sounds like strength because it eliminates doubt. In trading terms, it eliminates revision. No matter what turns an invalidation level into a vibe. The stop becomes symbolic, not surgical. A candle rips through the thesis and the mind responds with makeup. Not medicine. Replay the highlight reel. Polish the mirror. Reassure the self. This is not resilience. This is anesthesia. It numbs the signal that would end the risk cleanly. The numbness buys time, and time buys slippage. That is how accounts bleed while the inner monologue poses as iron. Looping past wins is sold as focus, but the loop quietly re-anchors risk around best-case mythology. The last victory becomes the baseline feeling to recover. Targets expand to match memory. Stops drift to avoid embarrassment. Revenge trades do not announce themselves. They arrive dressed as composure. Stay calm becomes a license to hold what should be cut. Trust yourself becomes permission to ignore the fresh tape. The script does not mention the cost of that silence. The cost accrues in basis points first, then in drawdown, then in a proud speech about comebacks while underwater. Never quit is the loudest drum. Treat quitting as the only sin, and exiting a broken idea starts to taste like failure. Language bends to accommodate the pride. A sharp cut becomes a temporary dip. A wipeout becomes a battle scar. The P and L does not read poetry. When the only acceptable identity is fighter, every rational exit looks like treason. So, the fight extends. Not because the setup deserves it, but because the mirror demands it. That is not courage under fire. That is a hostage situation where the ego holds the capital and calls itself mindset. The script's daily self-improvement pitch reads clean. Yet, the mechanism it gives is affirmation, not adaptation. No conditionality. No triggers for update. No blunt acceptance that a thesis can be wrong without you being wrong. Without conditional lanes, calm mutates into freeze. The breath slows while the hands refuse to act. Stillness gets mistaken for discipline. The posture looks disciplined on camera. On the ledger, it looks like a slow-motion margin call. Traders do not get wrecked because they panic at the first wick. They get wrecked because they romanticize the third and the fourth as opportunities to prove character. There is a deeper trap. The identity-first framing rewires cause and effect. Instead of process shaping confidence, confidence is tasked with shaping process. That reversal leads to talismanic behavior. You repeat lines not because they change the odds, but because they make the fear quieter. Fear does not need quieter. It needs boundaries. The text does not provide boundaries. It provides slogans. Slogans are frictionless. Boundaries bite. Without bite, Every edge turns into vibe until it comes back. Vibe is a cute word for drift. Binary framing infects choice, so the only failure is quitting draws a cartoon where the hero holds forever and the villain exits. Markets do not pay out in cartoons. They pay out in probabilities and invalidations. When the frame is binary, reactions become binary. Either hold to the last breath or double down to restore the image. The middle path acceptance that probabilistic edges require frequent. Emotionless exits never gets airtime because it lacks heroism. And yet, the ledger keeps a different religion. It rewards alignment with information, and it taxes romance with compounding pain. Even the calm tone of the text carries a hidden tax. The insistence on composure becomes a performance in itself. You learn to hold the face while the plan melts. The outer stillness feels like mastery. The inner rigidity ruins flexibility. You cannot update a thesis you've sworn to defend with pride. You cannot cut a loss you've sworn to interpret as a test. That oath is not bravery. It is a contract with denial, payable in capital. So, stand firm. The script says, but stand firm on what? An unconditional mantra that makes price secondary, or a living framework that treats every candle as a referendum on the idea. If the answer keeps circling back to image maintenance, how long until the market stops negotiating and starts collecting on the debt that the mirror keeps writing? Naive thinking in your text glows like a showroom floor. Stand firm. Be calm. Believe without condition. Loop past wins. Refuse to quit. It is glossy. It is tidy. And it sells the feeling that grit alone bends the tape. Harsh reality is the back room with the fluorescent buzz. Information moves. Invalidation happens. And belief without a thermostat cooks the account. Naive thinking centers the self. Reality centers the setup. Naive thinking says identity defines outcome. Reality says the next candle does not care what you vowed in the mirror. Take the line about standing firm in crisis. In the showroom version, firmness equals virtue. In the back room, firmness without conditions equals immobility. When the thesis snaps, stand firm posture mutates into a freeze. The face looks composed. The hands do nothing. The red stretches. The naive frame applauds the stillness and calls it discipline. Reality reads it as a refusal to update. Process dies while the posture wins a costume contest. Keep a positive view of yourself, no matter what. Naive logic treats positivity as oxygen. Reality treats positivity as a lens that can fog the chart. Under pressure, that lens flips. Any price that challenges the thesis feels like an attack on the self. The mind, trained by your text, rushes to defend the brand of you. That defense translates into tolerance for damage. Cut your losses hard, behavior gets recoded as weakness. Holding becomes heroism. The ledger calls it stubbornness with interest. Play your past wins on the mind screen. Naive thinking says nostalgia fuels confidence. Reality says nostalgia bends reference points. The highlight reel upgrades best-case memory into the default scenario. Targets expand to meet a feeling. Stops loosen to protect an image. And entries morph into sequels chasing a vibe. Revenge trades do not knock. They wear the mask of composure you keep praising. Calm voice. Reckless structure. That is the contrast your script never admits. Believe in yourself. No matter what you lost. No matter what you suffered. Naive thinking loves the absolutes. Reality hates them. Absolutes erase the question that actually matters. What changed? Losses stop being feedback and start being shame to outweight. Suffering becomes proof of future redemption instead of proof that the idea was misread. The ticker turns into a morality play. The edge turns into a rumor you swear will return. Meanwhile, slippage does not care about your vow. The only real failure is quitting. Naive thinking elevates this to a creed. Reality translates it into a tax. If quitting is evil, exiting the broken idea feels immoral. So the exit gets renamed, delayed, rewrapped. A clean cut becomes a temporary dip. A blown thesis becomes a trial by fire. The frame protects identity, not capital. And the deeper the drawdown, the louder the speeches about comebacks. That is not warrior spirit. That is ego-held hostage theater, where the ransom is your balance. Daily self-improvement, step by step. Naive thinking paints this as steady ascent. Reality asks, improvement of what? Your text points the improvement at confidence, not calibration. Without explicit triggers for update and without the word unless anywhere near these vows, calm becomes a tranquilizer. The breath slows, the hands freeze, the thesis hardens into dogma. You call it resilience. The ledger logs it as slow bleeding, dressed in mindfulness. Even choice is yours, plays different on each stage. Naive thinking frames the choice as moral. Be the fighter. Never surrender. Keep the chin up. Reality frames choice as probabilistic. This candle either keeps the edge alive or it does not. The naive frame punishes reasonable exits by branding them betrayal. Reality rewards those exits by keeping powder dry. But if the script keeps center stage, you end up choosing optics over odds, narrative over noise, and faith over fresh evidence. So the contrast stands bare. Naive thinking worships identity protection. Harsh reality pays only for information alignment. The hidden corner is how your text quietly trains the brain to translate every signal into a referendum on self-worth. Once that translation runs by default, how many more crises need to pass before stand firm becomes code for stand still while the pump and dump takes its toll? And how much cost will you label courage before the mirror admits the price was just denial with pretty language? There is an escape route inside your own text if the wiring gets flipped. The same lines that trap identity can be read as signals to detach it. Stand firm stops pointing at posture and starts pointing at framework. Firmness applies to the rule for updating, not to the position that needs updating. Keep calm stops meaning mannequin mode and starts meaning clear bandwidth for action. Calm without motion looks enlightened on camera. Calm with cuts looks expensive in the ledger, only to people who worship optics. The market does not grade speeches. It grades alignment. Keep a positive view of yourself, can live, but not as an anti-stop spell. Positivity earns its keep when it frames failure as data, not disgrace. In that light, the self-image becomes a shock absorber for exits, not a reason to dodge them. An identity that expects to cut your losses hard does not flinch when a thesis dies. It breathes out, pays the ticket, and keeps the powder dry. The same pride that once demanded endurance starts demanding precision. No heroics needed. Just a refusal to turn a small breach into a crusade. Play your past wins on the mind screen flips too. The reel stops being a narcotic and becomes an audit. The scene to replay is not the brag. It is the boundary. What kicked you in or out? What price proved you wrong? What structure made you right? The memory that matters is the moment the idea was falsified or confirmed, not the size of the victory lap. Highlight reels that glorify timing and hide invalidation teach addiction to feeling. Reels that spotlight the exact trigger teach respect for information. One leads to get wrecked on a pump and dump. The other builds scar tissue that actually helps. Believe in yourself no matter what you lost. Reads different when belief anchors to process. Belief tied to being right makes red feel personal. Belief tied to doing what the plan demands makes red feel like rent. Rent gets paid. Pride gets defended. Accounts that pay rent live to collect green another day. Accounts that defend pride shed blood, sweat, and tears to protect a story. it is still belief, just not the mystical kind. It is the quiet confidence that the next candle earns another decision rather than another monologue. Even the sacred cow, the only real failure is quitting, can be domesticated. Quitting the game is one thing. Quitting a broken idea is not failure. It is the subscription fee for continued participation. Read that line as, the only failure is quitting the cycle of testing, failing fast, and re-entering when the edge returns, and suddenly exits, stop tasting like shame. They taste like oxygen. The same sentence that once licensed bag holding starts licensing recovery. Language did not change. Allegiance did. Daily self-improvement. Step by step gets teeth when the step is measurable. Not a promise to be braver, but a record of where the thesis would have ended and whether you respected that end. The improvement curve tilts when every vow gains an unless. Stand firm unless the invalidation prints. Stay calm unless the plan requires action now. Believe unless the conditions that justified belief evaporate. The word unless does not kill resilience. It gives it a spine. Without unless, resilience drifts into trance. With unless, resilience becomes the willingness to act without ceremony. Choice is yours, then stops being motivational wallpaper and turns into cost accounting. Choose the narrative. Pay with drift. Choose the information. Pay with ego bruises that heal. The script still belongs to you. The difference is which part gets to be sacred. When the mirror is sacred, every cut feels like vandalism. When the process is sacred, every cut feels like maintenance. Maintenance is not sexy, but it is how engines run while others are busy polishing the hood. None of this adds a single external trick. It only scrapes the varnish off your lines and reassigns their loyalty. The same sentences either defend identity or defend adaptability. The voice on the page decides which god they serve. If the old reading fed denial with pretty words, the flipped reading feeds flexibility with the same words. So the question writes itself. When the next crisis walks in wearing the same costume of be brave and never quit, which version of your own mantra will answer the door? And how will the ledger spell the difference when the wick hits the level you swore to transcend? So, the flip is on the table. And now the script you wrote faces itself in a cleaner mirror. Stand firm no longer begs for a statue pose. It points at a rule that survives contact. Keep calm stops auditioning for a meditation retreat. It frees bandwidth so the hands can move when the thesis stops breathing. Keep a positive view of yourself no longer shields denial. It cushions the ego, so exits do not feel like public humiliation. Replay past wins, quits being dopamine, and becomes forensics. Believe in yourself detaches from being right and latches to doing the next correct thing. Never quit walks out of the church of bag holding and into the workshop, where cutting a broken idea is how you stay in the game. Same words. Different God. This is where the harmony shows up without softening the edge. Your text craves courage, composure, belief, persistence. None of those are wrong. They just rot when they orbit identity. Put them in orbit around information and they stop rotting. Courage quits defending pride and starts paying the small fee to avoid the large amputation. Composure stops playing mannequin and becomes a throttle for action. Belief stops cosplaying certainty and becomes fidelity to process. Persistence stops worshiping time and position and starts honoring time and learning. The market does not bow to virtue. It compensates alignment. No worries, the posters say. Meanwhile, the tape settles up in basis, not in slogan. Your absolute language is the true villain. No matter what, turns nuance into a sin. The fix is not more steel. It is conditional steel. Each vow needs its unless baked in from the start, not stapled on after the loss. Stand firm unless the invalidation prints. Keep calm unless the plan requires immediate action. Believe unless the data disqualifies belief. Refuse to quit unless quitting the idea preserves capital for the next shot. These unless clauses do not weaken resolve. They give it a spine that bends just enough to avoid snapping. Without them, resolve drifts into trance, and trance invites drawdown you later glorify as character building. Even the hero line, "the only real failure is quitting," can carry harmony without poisoning the well. Failure is quitting the cycle of testing, cutting, and returning clean when the edge reappears. That definition keeps the door open and the baggage light. In your text, quitting is framed as shame. In the ledger, quitting a dead idea is oxygen. The contrast is not cosmetic. It is the difference between bag holding because an identity hates to look weak and reloading because a process refuses to waste blood, sweat, and tears on a fantasy. The next time the mind tries to rebrand paralysis as discipline, remember this: stillness is only discipline when it preserves the rule, not when it protects the mirror. Choice is yours lands harder now. The choice is not simply brave versus cowardly. It is frame versus frame. Choose identity protection and you get exquisite posture with a P and L that quietly leaks. Choose information allegiance and you get fewer speeches, tighter cuts, and the kind of dull consistency that never trends on social feeds but compounds in real life. This is not romantic. It is maintenance. Engines run on maintenance while heroes stray into the ditch, arguing with the road. So the harmony is brutal by design. Keep the language. Amputate the absolutism. Reroute every virtue through conditional triggers. And let the ledger, not the mirror, arbitrate what counts as strength. If your text evolves there, the crisis you wanted to rise above no longer needs theatrics. It becomes just another decision point you answer without ceremony. And if the identity starts whispering for one more glossy vow, ask it a plain question it cannot dodge. Is this about being right? Or is this about staying solvent when the candle says you are wrong? If this hit home, and share it with your buddies who keep getting wrecked on a pump and dump and calling it mindset. Subscribe to Flow State Trading so you do not miss the next razor-sharp breakdown that scrapes off the motivational paint and leaves only the process that pays.